Of course not. He'll stay put. He can't wait to get back into the EU. What a show. What a bunch of people you are. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you to Ryan, Jodie, Amy, Mia and Mozzie. That's another one consigned to the dustbin of broadcasting history. We stand by for the legend that is Kev O'Sullivan for the next 3 hours with the Political Asylum. Of course, Petri Hoskins is here from 10 o'clock. We're back tomorrow from 4. Keep your calls coming. 0344 499 1000. Your texts continue on Talk 87222. You get the news at 7 and then Kev will see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Ta-ra.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I am Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be with you for the next 3 action-packed hours of news, views and powerhouse debate. Get involved, get it off your chest and get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000, or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. It's Tuesday, February the 5th. Here's what's coming up. Two-tier Keir is still kidding himself that the growing storm over his voice coach lessons in the height of the COVID restrictions will grow away. Let's pause to remember the last Prime Minister who thought those pesky little lockdown rules were only for ordinary people and didn't really apply to important politicians like him. That would be Boris Johnson, who could not believe that a quick glass of champagne and a slice of birthday cake with a colleague in the office would somehow wreck his career. But it did. If Keir Starmer broke the rules that the Westminster gang expected the rest of us to obey, don't forget it was Christmas 2020. We couldn't even be with our loved ones during the festive season. He's seeing his voice coach. She gets on a train up from Brighton, first class, goes to Labour headquarters. She's apparently a key Labour worker. Yeah, right. If this guy broke the rules, trust me, he is in more trouble than he thinks. If he did, Should he go the way of Bojo? Should two-tier Keir resign? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. In other news, shocking new revelations have exposed the sheer lunacy of Britain's open arms approach to illegal migrants. Figures unearthed after Freedom of Information request by the Telegraph newspaper reveal that taxpayers' money has been used to supply asylum seekers with, among many other freebies, listen to this, PlayStations, DJ lessons, driving lessons, mobile phones, yoga and Tai Chi sessions, food hygiene courses, and even for those billeted in the Merseyside area, special tours of Liverpool Football Club's Anfield Stadium. Tory-run West Sussex Council gave £20,000 to the controversial Care for Calais charity that does its level best to get as many migrants from France to Britain as humanly possible. Local authorities have spent a staggering, check this out, £141 million on their own generosity initiatives to foreigners who broke into Britain. This is your money they're spending. Does this annoy you? If not, why not? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, a little later, I'll talk about the decline and fall of Britain's political elites with journalist and author Brendan O'Neill, like self-important loser Rory Stewart, who just got crucified by the far cleverer J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America, in a transatlantic row over the nature of Christian love. Don't you wish Rory would wind his scrawny neck in? Isn't this former Tory minister typical of what's gone wrong with the Tories? Just a bunch of metropolitan lefties pretending to be conservatives. 0344 499 1000. Plus, more shock figures on the vast amounts of money the cops are spending on diversity. One police force alone, £1 million a year, over £1 million a year on diversity officers. Catch the bad guys. Never mind DEI. 0344 499 1000. Also, the latest on the NHS's refusal to release the medical report on Nottingham killer Valdo Calicone, because to do so would apparently invade his privacy. So that's more important than justice for the victims' grieving families, is it? What's going on? 0344 499 1000. And finally, as Elon Musk drives a truck through America's $60 billion plus US aid project, the truth about the £15 billion a year Britain hands to foreign countries while our debt mounting rockets. In effect, we are borrowing massive amounts of money, more money than ever before, possibly ruinous mountains of money we're borrowing, and when we get the money, we send it abroad to foreign countries. Foreign aid, isn't it? Unbelievable. What do you reckon? 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more. So don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Tuesday night together. And for the first half an hour, always love a Tuesday, I am joined, as always, by the brilliant columnist of The Sun, The Sunday Times and The Spectator. And now, of course, a radio presenter on Times Radio on Saturday morning from 10 until 1 p.m. I heartily recommend that to start your weekend off with a bang. Welcome to Rod Liddle.
Hiya, how you doing, Kev?
I'm all right, mate. Listen, I thought you'd like this one. Let's kick off with Labour and its obsession with the Muslim vote. The Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, who coincidentally, whose own constituency, Ashton-under-Lyne, has a massive Muslim community, she's setting up a council on Islamophobia to draw up a new official definition of that term. It's all keyed in with racism and all that sort of thing. Former Tory Attorney General Manic Remainer Dominic Grieve is being recommended to chair this council. Now, the thing is, This is all about working to combat Muslim hate, etc., etc. Now, nobody approves of Muslim hate, and we should be kind and generous to our Muslim communities. But don't you think, Rod, that a more pressing issue in terms of the hatred of an ethnic minority would be anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is seriously rocketing. I don't think there is a massive Islamophobic problem, if that is such a word as that, in this country. We do have a massive anti-Semitic problem. Labour's doing nothing about that, and yet it's setting up this Council for Islamophobia. What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, we do have an anti-Semitism problem, and Jewish people in London have never felt less secure, less safe. And the reason we have it, most of it's coming from Islamists within the Muslim community. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. But you argue that that's a crucial thing. It isn't. There are only 300,000 or so Jewish people in the United Kingdom, and so Labour doesn't care one bit about what happens to them, as we saw previously under Jeremy Corbyn. But Labour has a real problem in many of its inner city seats, particularly in Birmingham and the West Midlands, in Stoke, but also exceptionally so in Bradford, Blackburn, Burnley, Darwin, Batley, with a very, very high Muslim vote, which they've relied on idly and frankly rudely, just relied on it as a matter of course, that those votes will go to Labour. And suddenly, at the last election, it was revealed that they're not going to Labour, they're going to almost anyone but. So they've got a huge problem with that, which is why you're seeing all these overtures to the Muslim community. Because it may be that some Muslim people are looking at what Sir Keir Starmer said, and give respect to Starmer, he was reasonably good in making it clear that he had no time for Hamas, and that we are allies with Israel, and that attack on October the 7th was appalling. So they didn't like any of that, some of the extremists, and they decamped to various other parties, such as George Galloway's party, such as various other independent candidates. But there are probably also, I like to think this, and I know of a few myself, Muslim friends, who are utterly sick of the Labour Party and now vote for the Conservatives or for Reform or for Britain's growing Social Democratic Party, Kev. They've had enough of being taken for granted, because basically all that Labour does with the Muslim community is say, we will have your votes. Yeah, we might support you a bit on Palestine, but we're not going to do anything else for you. What we're going to do is treat you like a client group who are needy. Like we're going to treat you like children. It's a bit like they do with the black vote. And of course, black Britons are now saying, hang on a minute, just as they did in America, just saying, no, we're not going to be treated like toddlers anymore. We're going to vote Republican, and they're saying over here we're going to vote Tory, we're going to vote for someone else. So they do have a great problem there, which is why the ludicrous Angela Rayner, with her appalling diction, lack of education, is wandering around trying to whip up a degree of publicity for what she's doing for the Muslim community. She'd be far better off lowering taxes or removing national insurance hikes from small businesses. A lot of Muslim small business owners, that would do more for the community than this fatuous business which disinters the long dead corpse of Dominic Grieve from beneath the earth and hoists him up. This is a man who tried to stop Brexit by fair means or foul. Ghastly bloke. But there we are.
Here's the thing, right? I don't think we need a definition of Islamophobia. We've got one at the moment. We don't.
There's no such thing.
We don't need that.
No such thing.
Yeah, and we don't need a new one. And in terms of Dominic Grieve, apparently he's been recommended to chair this pointless council because of his fabulous history of working to combat anti-Muslim hate. He did this when he was chairman of something called the Citizens UK Commission. How's that campaign of his to combat anti-Muslim hate going? And secondly, you know, I just don't think we need this. And what worries me about this, when you get people like Rayner getting involved, and indeed Keir Starmer and that Muslim-loving Labour Party, they love them because of the Muslim vote, is that in the end, this definition, whatever they come up with, will be, without a shadow of a doubt, a restriction on freedom of speech. It will, for example, ban me or you saying, I'm not sure the burqa is a good idea. I think it disrespects women. It makes identification a problem. And other countries, European countries like France, have banned it. Why don't we? Let me tell you, you well know this, Rod. When they come up with their stupid definition of Islamophobia, you or I will be probably banned for saying that. And if we do say it, we'll be nicked for a hate crime.
But, well, no, you're right, but it's worse than that. There's no such thing as Islamophobia. You can't be phobic about an ideology. You know, there are undoubtedly people in this country who hate Muslims, and you know they're to be despised and you know, hopefully brought to book for whatever they do. But you cannot hate an ideology. You cannot have a phobia about an ideology. You can just
terrified of Islamophobia.
You can dislike it. You know, you can say, I think it's a bit a bit vigorous in its pursuit of people who aren't Muslims. I think it's I don't like it very much. I'm not keen on the Quran. You should be allowed to say these things. Mm-hmm. You know, there are Muslims who are allowed to say these things. You know, you look at the degree to which Ayan Hirsi Ali, who's actually on my programme on Saturday, I think, this coming Saturday, how she was persecuted by her own Muslim community for renouncing Islam. It's an absurdity, and you're absolutely right. Of course, it's a clampdown on freedom of speech as well. But then we've had so many restrictions on freedom of speech in the last 25 years, both from the Labour Party and indeed the Conservative Party, that this is simply another one, and one is best advised just to ignore them all, just ignore them, and say exactly what you think, exactly what you mean, and if the police come knocking at the door, be rude to them and fight back.
And you should, you know, a guy got arrested in Manchester a couple of days ago for, in a political gesture, burning a copy of the Quran. You know, I personally, you know, I wouldn't advise anybody to do that. Seems a little bit on the extreme side. But in this country, in a free democracy, if you want to do that, you should be allowed to. Now, Keir Starmer has already indicated that he'll go along with new rules, regulations and laws to prevent us being able to do such a thing.
Well, that's shocking. You see, and I don't see why it should be any more of a crime to burn a copy of the Quran than it would be to burn a copy of a Nick Hornby novel, which I would actually like to burn, if I'm absolutely honest. I mean, that is a restriction on freedom of expression. I disagree with it, but I have no problem, really, with that incendiary Muslim preacher, Mohammed Chowdhury, leading people in chanting, British soldiers go to hell. I think that we are a country which values freedom of speech, and he should be allowed to say that. But by the same token, I should also be allowed to say that I think Islam is a repressive religion, and at its worst, a violent and repressive religion. And I should be able to say that without some thick plod coming round to my door and saying, hello, you're banged up, mate.
Yeah.
Got ya.
Yeah, indeed. Assistant Chief Constable of Manchester, Stephanie Parker, said after the arrest of this guy, who I don't think was breaking any British laws, we understand the deep concern this will cause within some of our diverse communities and are aware of a live...
Hang on a sec, Kev. That's the other thing. What was her name?
Stephanie, hang on a second, I've lost it now.
Stephanie Moron.
Yes, that's the one. Moron. That's it.
Stephanie moron who thinks the word diversity means Muslim. You know, it doesn't. It means lots of different people from different varieties and so on. But what she was using it there to mean Muslim. You know, she's a moron. And
we made a swift arrest at the time. I don't think they should be making arrests of that sort of thing.
No, I don't.
And this is the problem. This is the problem that, you know, you can rest assured that Dominic Greaves will preside over a new definition of Islamophobia and a new kind of culture that will make burning the Quran somehow against the law. And it should not be.
He's got a face like sunlight on a coffin lid. I can't stand that man. But no, you're absolutely right. Sorry, that was just a moment of personal vituperation, which we shouldn't really allow into a programme.
I'm with you all the way, actually, Rod. Listen, we're going to go to break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about, you've heard about two-tier Keir. Well, meet four-tier Keir. We're going to talk about his vocal lessons. How do you think they're going? Stay tuned, everyone.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to Rod Little. Rod, bear with us. We're going to play a little piece of footage of Keir Starmer getting quite tetchy when challenged by Jack Alsam of The Sun over in Brussels, asking him, did you break the COVID rules, the lockdown rules, when you took speech lessons from your vocal coach back in 2020 on Christmas Eve? Let's have a look.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you.
Of course not.
Was your voice coach definitely a key word?
Do you think he's telling the truth, that all rules were followed there? His voice coach, somebody called Leonie Mellinger, she's an actress. She travelled first class from Brighton to London on that Christmas Eve 2020 to deliver vital speech lessons to the nasally challenged Labour leader. She went through several tiers. I think London was in 4-tier lockdown then, very strict lockdowns. Loved ones were not allowed to spend Christmas together. She proceeded with impunity to Labour HQ to give Keir Starmer a vital speech lesson ahead of his response to Boris Johnson's leave deal. I mean, this kind of stinks, doesn't it? Now, the last Prime Minister who didn't think those pesky little lockdown rules really applied to him and thought that who would get in a lather about a piece of birthday cake and a glass of champagne in number 10 Downing Street, that was Boris Johnson. Now, I've got a lot of sympathy with him. That's a ridiculous reason to lose your career, but it was his misunderstanding of what the public were feeling then that lost him his job. People saying, well, we're not allowed to see our loved ones. We can't have a glass of champagne with our friends. And Boris Johnson lost his job as the Prime Minister on the back of that. I think Starmer looks as if he could be heading in the same direction if he's not careful.
Could be. I mean, the first thing to say is, God, you hope Sir Keir got his money back. He still sounds like you know, an indistinct fridge freezer if it had a voice. You know, it's a badly wired one. No, it's actually outrageous, and I suspect that it will come to nothing because we've moved 3-4 years on from that very febrile time. But, you know, you're absolutely right. Boris Johnson lost his job because he had a piece of cake at a party. We all thought it was ridiculous at the time. But here we have the leader of the opposition, as he was at the time, organising for people to break those very strict COVID lockdowns. There's another big issue here because, I don't know, my suspicion is that Boris didn't have his heart in lockdown quite as much as, you know. But Labour was all for increasing fines, increasing lockdown measures, making sure no one was allowed to go anywhere. I mean, this was a time when you couldn't hear from a Labour Party spokesman without them saying, we need more measures, we need more measures. You know, and for Starmer to have broken, I think this is a really, really big issue. And my fear is that it won't get the sort of traction which led to Boris's downfall back in whenever it was, 2022, was it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it would have been about then. Have you seen the latest sort of excerpts from this book, Get In, which is the story of Keir Starmer and Labour, revealing, amongst other things, the story of Lord Wahid Ali, who's actually an old friend of mine, but he's marching around number 10, telling everyone who wants to listen. The trouble with Keir Starmer is he's got no idea of leadership and control. Also, Tony Blair said that. For some reason, he said that the good thing about Keir Starmer was that he's intelligent. I'm not sure where he got that information from, but we'll allow him that. But he said he's not a leader. So people in high places in the Labour movement do not trust this guy to be Prime Minister. He's not a leader, is he?
No, well, that's the other issue, which is that you leave aside the COVID stuff. And I'm sorry, Kev, I really think that's an important issue. And I've just been talking to Boris Johnson about it. He hasn't said anything yet. But if I were Boris, I'd say, come on, Sir Keir, you ought to get Sue Gray involved in having a look at this. Because that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and then you give her a job later on. That would, by the way.
But no, he's not. He's not liked by the Labour Party. I was speaking to Rosie Duffield on my Times Radio programme a couple of weeks ago, and she absolutely tore him to bits on his management style, his lack of approachability, his unfairness towards the people who voted Labour and have got nothing but misery out of the Labour government they elected. He is on very thin ice. The suspicion is that it'll be the economy one way or the other which does for him. But everything he's done since he took up the role on July the 4th has been maladroit, it has been corporate, it has been boring, and it has been deeply damaging to our country.
Try to vocalise, if you can, articulate what it is about this guy. So people like you and me, we go, oh, this Labour government, they're a disaster, Starmer's a disaster, catastrophe and all that. But a lot of people think, oh, well, people like Kevin and Rod would say that, particularly here on Talk, where we're no particular fans of the Labour movement. But I'm trying to stress to people, it isn't just that. You know, I never expected Keir Starmer and the new Labour government to be all that great, but I'm pretty shocked with just how bad they are. They are exceptionally incompetent, aren't they?
They are. Listen, I was in the Labour Party for 38 years, you know.
Yeah.
And
You'll never get that time back.
No, I'll never get that time back, you're quite right. And I still carry a flag for Neil Kinnock, for people who many people on the right really hate, obviously for David Owen, for Dennis Healey, even for quite a few of those people in that Blair government, you know, people like Robin Cook, Alan Johnston, David Blunkett, and especially Caroline, I've forgotten her surname.
Flint.
Yeah, Caroline Flint, yeah. These were good people who cared about the people who voted for them. The thing is, with Starmer, he's shifty.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't seen a more shifty-looking politician since Nixon decided to bow out in 1974. There is a shiftiness about him. I don't trust a word he says. And, you know, Boris was cavalier with the truth. We know that. A lot of his lies didn't mean anything and were often jokes. Some of them did. But I've never seen anyone who is as closed, shifty and corporate. He reminds me of the chief executive of a big company which is doing something wicked and doesn't want anyone to know about it.
It's a good analogy.
That's the impression I get.
Absolutely.
You know?
And do you reckon, last question, Rod, you've sort of floated this in the past to me, that there's a fair chance that, Labour, I don't think are the most brilliant outfit ever, but they're not entirely stupid. They've got some reasonably clever people in their ranks. They must know that this guy Starmer is going to be bad news at the next election. Do you think it's possible that he won't make it to the next election? They'll replace him?
About 50-50. I think. I think there's a very good chance they will. A lot depends on whether Rachel from Accounts, as you memorably christened her, manages to do anything with the economy. I nicked that from you, by the way, for my column last weekend.
You're very welcome. I think I might have nicked it from Lee Anderson, you know.
Oh, right, OK. Fair enough.
But great column, by the way, as always. I look forward to reading it. Look forward to reading you in The Sun and The Spectator. And I'll tune in on Saturday morning. It takes so long to get through all of your bloody jobs. But great to talk to you, Rod, as always. We'll talk again next week. That's Rod Liddle there, on excellent form as usual. Next up, we're going to talk about a shocking story about the 141 million quid that our local councils have been spending to be generous to our migrants, the illegal migrants who broke into the country. Oh, here's a PlayStation, here's driving lessons. Oh, how about yoga? Do you fancy that? What about a tour of Anfield Football Stadium? Would you like to do that? You're illegal, you broke into the country, but, you know, oh, here's some free money, free accommodation. It's just ridiculous, folks. Stay tuned for that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Guess who's in the studio? It is Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre of Migration Control. And let me tell you, he's the very man for this next half hour. Welcome, Robert. We need to talk about this. This is extraordinary. The fact that our local councils, local authorities all over the country have been lashing out. Last year, they spent £141 million on various sort of basically treats for migrants. So they, for example, what did they get? They've got PlayStations, DJ lessons. DJ lessons? Who needs lessons to be a DJ? Well, migrants, apparently. Driving lessons, mobile phones, yoga and Tai Chi sessions, food hygiene courses, and if you're lucky enough to be an asylum seeker billeted in the Merseyside area, even special tours of Liverpool's Anfield Football Stadium. The Tory-run West Sussex Council, these are Tories, they gave £20,000 to Care for Calais, the charity that basically gets as many illegal migrants across from France to Britain as humanly possible. I mean, Rupert Lowe from the Reform Party has called this an utter disgrace. I mean, that's an understatement, isn't it? I mean, this is just appalling.
It is. It's mud in the face, frankly, of the British public. And I mean, we can put the cost of these things to one side, although that is itself incredibly offensive. And then I think if we start thinking about the fact that, you know, British families would kill for these opportunities, walking around Anfield, that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's the kind of thing that families would spend thousands of pounds to get their children to go and give the opportunity for them to have a look around. And then, you know, there's other examples as well, not quite in the list. You know, they're working on extensive networks to bring these asylum seekers into zoos and have a look around on zoos and have have first-hand experience in zoology and, you know, really get to know how these things work. Well, exactly, and this is the kind of stuff that's being extended in absolute largesse. It's not just the councils, though. There is a real industry now in terms of providing these asylum seekers with a life of luxury, frankly, and, you know, we've got charity after charity bending over themselves, clambering over one another to make sure that they seem to be the most virtuous. They're doing enough for these asylum seekers. And let's not forget that there are hundreds of thousands of British families around the country at the moment that are, you know, borderline destitute. They're being really hardly hit by the state of the economy, and yet these kind of opportunities are simply out of reach and they're being overlooked.
Well, Rupert Lowe quite rightly, and many other politicians are now saying that every single penny being spent on this nonsense by local councils, that this is the public's money. You know, either you've paid for this through your council tax or your income tax. The authorities are taking your money and spending it on playstations for asylum seekers. They're spending it on yoga sessions, Tai Chi, DJ lessons. I don't even know what that is. Circus skills classes. So, as you say, this is really just to provide these welcome guests, because that's what they are. We embrace them as soon as they break our laws. They break our laws, they break into our country illegally. Well, first up, we stick them in a 4-star hotel. We give them 45 quid a week. We pay for their food. They get free food for the foreseeable future. Not like you and me. They don't have to go out and look at their shopping bills. We give them free food. Ready, prepared. It's all cooked, you know, so free food, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers to fight their case to stay here. Well, I mean, it's sanity, isn't it? I mean, I remember the French mayor of Wimereux, that northern coastal town in France, he said, you know, we do our best to stop. I'm not sure the French do their best to stop the migrants, but he, for the sake of argument, will grant him this. He said, we do our best to stop these migrants, but you people in Britain, you offer them so many incentives. How are we going to stop them leaving? And well, it's a good point, isn't it?
This is the problem. Britain is the pull capital of Europe. We are the ones extending the most generosity. We are the ones spending the most money. We are the ones with the largest illegal immigrant population in Europe. And you have to wonder, if you're a migrant coming from countries such as Eritrea or Afghanistan and you're hoping to settle down and make a life for yourself that you'd think is quite comfortable, where would you go? First on the list would be Britain. And frankly, this list of examples that you've just provided, I think really shows that, you know, councils can afford to be not as stringent as they are with the council tax rises. I think there's an argument that perhaps those councils that are extending such generosity need to really start trimming the fat of their budgets. I think we could probably look into whether the government's central rebate and central money that they're giving to these councils needs to be curtailed to some extent. And the fact of the matter is that it's not just those councils, though. There is a national government at the moment that is spending between 6 and 14 billion. And I know that's a huge range, but that is simply because so much of the costs that these people are inflicting upon us, and so much of the benefits that we're extending to them are being hidden from us. The benefits that they're receiving, these costs that we're having to spend, they're being hidden in these other bills. They're being hidden in the HMRC benefit bill. They're being hid across the board. So, frankly, we don't actually know how much we are spending on them, but it's a heck of a lot more than, you know, you and I could hope to have spent in our areas.
Yeah, and this of course is local councils, local authorities taking it upon themselves to be unusually generous to these migrants. And you know what we're talking about. These will be sort of bien pensant, do-gooder local lefties. Oh, be kind, be generous, you know. Well, you know, I'm not against that kind of emotion, that kind of impulse to be kind to people, but I am if they're taking my money and spending it on PlayStations for migrants. This is just a sick joke. It's just beyond comedy, isn't it?
Well, frankly, it's small fry politicians getting ahead of themselves. Rather than focusing on the potholes, the bin collections, keeping the hedgerows trimmed, they're engaging in these vast value-driven crusades. They're embarking on these things that, you know, are way above their pay grade, way above their remit, and it is coming with huge costs to the taxpayer. And I think the problem really does come, again, to go back to it, from the central government. It's transmuted onto these councils this sense of, well, the asylum system is working on these people are vulnerable, we need to make sure that they're okay. And councils have taken it upon themselves to gold plate that instruction and to go above and beyond. They're also getting pressure, of course, from charities at a local level. If you picked any council across the UK at random, you'd be able to see all kinds of schemes that they've embarked on a local level, with churches, with charities, whether that's extending bikes, whether that's extending even more food. You know, they're already getting free food, but they get given treats, you know, tobacco, all this kind of stuff. So councils are really being susceptible to these messages from both ends, and they have absolutely let it run away from them.
I'll just read a few of the special facilities that have been provided by various councils. Cheshire West and Chester spent £2,235 on transport to Eid prayers, while Middlesbrough paid £1,400 for a Quran reading session. Cheshire West put £116,000 into a refugee grant funding something called Charwek. That was a local race equality centre that offers training on tackling extremism and hate crime awareness. Labour-run Bradford has spent £4 million of a government grant on settling refugees in the area and paid £2,400 for a new Welcome to Bradford website to provide migrants with guidance and help for those arriving new to the city. And Sheffield Council, this is just some examples, folks. Sheffield Council, this one's a good one, they spent £27,880 last year on the Migration Matters Festival, a 9-day celebration of sanctuary, cultural identity and migration. It's like a sort of a parody, isn't it?
I've had enough. How many plane tickets could we buy for that fee? You know, these people are here, they've entered our country illegally, they're being put up at our cost. That should be enough, quite frankly. That, as far as I'm concerned, that's already far too generous. These people are now living a life of absolute rally. Councils really have a lot to account for, and what's interesting is tomorrow we will probably see that a significant number of county councils will be cancelling the local elections in their area. We don't know how many, but we have a sense. Those councils, since 2021, the last time that people went to the ballot box, have seen a 344% increase in the number of illegal migrants that they are having to put up. The number of that's in hotels, that's in social housing, which is displacing Brits, of course. So it's no wonder, frankly, that many councillors are trying to run away from the electorate, because councils have a large part to play in this problem. They have, of course, we see occasionally a local council taking the Home Office to court or putting up a bit of a fight, but across the board, generally, they've been far too pliant in this issue. And, you know, I think that is a large part of why tomorrow we will probably see that so many have said, no, electors, we don't really want you passing verdict on our track record.
Yeah, I should say that all of this information is comes at us from a Freedom of Information request, a series of Freedom of Information requests by the Daily Telegraph newspaper, so we're indebted to them. But it has opened a Pandora's box of ludicrous overspending, £141 million since 2022, basically on freebies for illegal migrants. And when I say freebies, you've heard what we said: PlayStations, yoga sessions, driving lessons, free phones, SIM cards, and the list goes on. It's just crazy. We're supposed to have deterrence, right? There isn't any. There aren't any. Keir Starmer scrapped the Rwanda scheme on day one. A lot of people said, well, it just didn't work. It didn't work. How do you know? We didn't start it. He scrapped it after the British taxpayer had been charged £700 million investing in it, getting it ready. He comes in, scraps it without a second thought. We now have no deterrence, but what we do have, as this proves, not to mention what the national government gives the migrants, we just have a series of basically luxury incentives.
And it's about to get a lot worse. Well, let's not forget that this week the Labour Party have scrapped plans as well that would have prevented someone entering our country illegally to claim British citizenship. Yeah. Therefore, these people coming in on the small boats, they'll be able to claim a British passport, say that they're British, and therefore enter the benefit system. They'll be able to sign on to universal credit.
They'll be known then as British citizens, or as the Labour Party like to call them, Labour voters. So that's what that is all about. But it might not work out for them. That's what the Democrats think in America. Oh, we get all the Latino immigrants, they'll all vote for us. They all voted for Trump. So it doesn't necessarily work. Listen, Robert, good stuff there. Stay where you are, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the rise of reform. And I think what we've just been discussing has got a lot to do with that. That next, stay tuned.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. We've just been discussing this astonishing revelation that local councils around the country last year spent £141 million on special presents, really, gifts, luxury items for migrants, for illegal migrants, people who broke into this country, asylum seekers as they're flatteringly called. These people shouldn't even be allowed in my view. They broke our laws to get into the country. Hey, you're detained, then you're deported, like they do in Australia. Sorry, you came here illegally, you cannot be considered for legal asylum. End of. We should be doing that. Instead, we're giving them presents. PlayStations, yoga sessions, driving lessons, you name it, trips around Anfield. I remember, Robert, by the way, do you remember the Bibby Stockholm barge? That the residents of that barge, they were given free season tickets to the local county cricket ground. I mean, What do you make of this? Everybody, let me know. 0344 499 1000. Don't you think we need deterrence to stop migrants coming here rather than encouragements, luxury enticements? Don't you think that's a little bit adrift in terms of a plan to keep our migrant crisis under control? 0344 499 1000. Now, Robert, this is possibly sort of connected to exactly what we're talking about there, but there's no getting away from the rise of Reform UK. Nigel Farage's party now in a major YouGov poll. Now, YouGov, the doyen of pollsters, have now put Nigel Farage's Reform UK on 25%. That makes it 1% ahead of Labour and 4 points ahead of the Conservatives. So it is now officially, according to YouGov, the most popular party in the country. And that, I think, is mainly because Reform UK understand what people feel about the migrant crisis. Keir Starmer is looking like the latest Prime Minister, elite North Londoner who cannot get through his thick metropolitan head that this matters to people around the country. Farage and the gang understand that, and that's why I think they're rising.
It is directly connected, you're absolutely right, to first the small boats crisis and then the huge levels of legal migration that we saw under the Conservatives. And I think the reason why, since the general election, we have seen Reform to continue to rise and rise and rise is because neither of the main parties have actually put out a platform that suggests they understand the concerns. Labour keep going on about smashing the gangs. They have made a brief intimation that they might do something to bring down legal migration, although plans on that are still forthcoming. The Tory party have left an absolute vacuum. They just pretty much refused to talk about legal migration, apart from, of course, the Foreign Secretary last week, who tried to defend the record levels of migration that we saw under their watch, reaching 1 million net some years. So I think both of these parties really have a track record of failure on this front, and I don't really know what they can do in the foreseeable future that can perhaps address voters' concerns that these people are just going to lead to more of the same. We can't carry on with the levels of legal migration, let alone the insult that is illegal migration. I don't think either of the parties can offer anything.
Yeah, I mean, it looks as if Labour, whilst criticising the Tories, you let all these people in 14 years, a million a year. Literally, that was the level of legal migration, never mind illegal. It looks as if Labour, according to the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, are going to be letting in 300,000 to 400,000 until 2032, by which time our population will be 72.5 million, at least our official population. I suspect it's a lot higher than that. People always talk about illegal migrants. They never talk about the ones that get through, that never get caught. And many of them apparently check into their four-star hotel for one night, wash, shave, and then disappear. So the figure could be higher than that. And Reform has a definite plan to stop the migrant crisis, and I think that is what is attracting the public. The Conservatives haven't got a clue, no plan whatsoever. Keir Starmer won't put a cap on immigration, and that nonsense about smash the evil people smuggling gangs, that's a false flag. Everybody knows that's not going to work.
Well, look, even from a comms perspective, what the Labour Party are doing is absolutely ridiculous, let alone the implications it has for the country. They're talking about sentencing people to prison or prosecuting people because they get found with life jackets. That's not the kind of decisive action that is actually needed to tackle this problem. It's the kind of action that, at the moment, Reform Party are the only party setting out. It's decisively trying to turn back boats where we can, and then if they are able to make it onto the shore, they are gone within a matter of minutes, quite frankly, and leaving the ECHR is clearly a prerequisite of that as well. And again, Reform are the only party that have managed to join the dots between what our human rights law has implied and resulted in when it comes to our asylum system. The Tories are still having an internal debate about that, frankly, because one flank does recognise this issue, but the other flank is Lib Dems in all but name. The Labour Party are really averse to any conversation about this that might make for awkward conversation around their Islington dinner table. So there is a huge gap in the market, given that this is the single most salient issue in the country at the moment, for the Reform Party to keep making headwinds until either the Conservatives or the Labour Party put together a proper plan. Labour clearly won't. The Conservatives are going through what they kind of call a self-reflection phase, but the longer they let that go on, the longer the momentum stays with the Reform Party.
And Kemi Badenoch, who, I guess I had fairly high hopes for. I think has been a massive disappointment. I mean, I'm afraid she's far too establishment, far too afraid to disturb the universe. I mean, it's an open goal for her. All right, Keir Starmer won't put a number. He won't put a cap on immigration. I will. You know, by the time you get elected, no one will remember. Put a figure on it. You know, but she goes, oh, it's, you know, leaving the ECHR is just an easy solution. It's a little bit more complex than that. Actually, Kemi, it just isn't, is it?
No, and I think neither of the two main parties recognise where the public are on this issue at the moment.
Yeah, they don't.
There was a poll during the general election, actually, that said that almost half the country want a complete freeze to legal migration. Obviously, those people you could probably assume are pretty nonplussed and not very happy with the illegal migration crisis. But 50% want a complete freeze to non-essential legal migration because they can feel the changes that it's making to their communities. They can feel the pressure that it's putting on their public services. They can feel their world around them, their streets changing. And the Conservative Party were the main culprits on this. Between 2010 and 2024, they did engage, and Keir Starmer was right in this, they did engage in effectively a unilateral experiment in mass migration. Now, clearly, Tony Blair and the Labour Party sowed the seeds of that, and the Conservatives merely put it on steroids. But there was no escaping the fact that the Conservative track record on this issue would mean that it's incredibly difficult to trust them by the next election, and that's why Kemi Badenoch deciding to put off her policy platform on this for the foreseeable future leaves a huge vacuum, and it doesn't do anything to reassure voters' trust.
Is it just me, or is she putting off her policy platform on absolutely everything? I mean, you know, we've had the most turbulent news cycle I can remember in the last couple of weeks, you know, all the way from Southport to the migration figures, you know, to you know, Keir Starmer betraying Brexit, and the only thing I've heard from her is she's a bit worried about academy schools. A perfectly okay topic, but you know, she should be making headlines in the areas that people are concerned about and that people are talking about, and the migrant crisis is one of them.
She's been effectively silent, and as we've seen in Parliament, the real opposition has been coming from the likes of Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, and this is the problem that Kemi Badenoch faces. She was clearly the kind of golden child of the Conservative Party owing to her position on the trans issue, which she quite clearly got right, but she made too much hay out of that, and she kind of built her whole reputation as that no-talking nonsense, not afraid to call out woke, whereas the population has kind of shifted somewhat now. Our focus clearly isn't as much as it once was on those kind of culture war issues. Our focus now is on what is happening to our country and what is going on with the migration crises. And I don't think she's actually recognised that she needs to kind of update Kemi, as you like, and have a Kemi 2.0 who is able to sing different tunes. She's still singing the tunes from 5 years ago.
Absolutely. People are worried that we're losing the entire sort of flavour of this country, and she doesn't seem to realise that. Keir Starmer doesn't, but the people do, and I think Reform do, which is why they're rising. Robert Bates, thank you so much. That was excellent. We'll be back in just a little while with Brendan O'Neill.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This
welcome back. In just a little while, half an hour or so, be taking your calls. 03444 499 1000. What you think about the £141 million spent by our local councils on stuff like playstations, yoga lessons, tours of Anfield Football Stadium for illegal migrants, people who broke into the country illegally. Also, in just a little while, we'll be talking about diversity-obsessed policing. West Yorkshire Police that we have discerned spent more than £1 million last year on diversity while not catching very many crooks. Why don't coppers start doing what they're supposed to do? And what about diversity? Catch the bad guys. And towards the end of the hour, the case of Valdo Calaconi, the Nottingham triple killer, needs to be discussed. The NHS England is not releasing details of the failures in his medical treatment due to his privacy. They've got to preserve his privacy. What about justice for the families, the victims' families? What about the victims' families? Don't they have a right to know the appalling catalogue of errors that led up to that horrific tragedy in June 23 in Nottingham? Don't they have a right to know? Why are we prioritising Valdo Calaconi's privacy over the rights of the victims' grieving relatives? I think it's disgusting. 03444 499 1000. I think you might like who we'll be talking to about that. That's coming up a little later. But first of all, let's many of the topics that we discussed, like we were just discussing the migrant crisis, two-tier Keir, or four-tier Keir as we now call him, because he had his vocal coach lessons inside the four-tier restrictions, the lockdown restrictions at the time, 2020 Christmas Eve. All of this, I think it's this sort of imperious way that the political elites treat us. It's as if you voted us in and now we'll get on with governing the country. Don't bother us too much. And I think that age of condescension is the condescension might not be ending, but the public accepting it, the public putting up with it, I think is coming to an end. I think we've had enough. Keir Starmer, hey, did you break the COVID? Of course not! Well, why don't you explain it to us properly? Why don't you treat us like adults? What exactly happened? Why did you have a voice coach, come through about 4 different tiers, breaking or lockdowns left, right and centre just to come and give you a vocal lesson? Why did you do that? Come on, treat us like grown-ups. You don't have to know that. Remember when he was asked about two-tier policing? That's not an issue. Well, it is an issue. And I think we're sick of it. We're sick of this elitism from the political classes, many of them in this country, of course, from North London, Guardian readers. Now, chief among these types, I think, is Rory Stewart. He's a former Tory minister who I think sums up everything that's wrong with the Conservative Party. First of all, he's not really a Conservative. He's quite clearly a sort of left-winger. He's a liberal left-winger, and he now does a very successful podcast with Alistair Campbell, making a fortune, by the way. Anyway, he's just had a massive row with the American Vice President, J.D. Vance, about the nature of Christian love. And J.D. Vance, he might be a hillbilly. He might come from the mountains. He comes from a very difficult background, but he fought against that. He fought through that. He went to Harvard, Yale. He's an extremely clever man, and I would suggest one hell of a lot cleverer than Rory Stewart, and certainly a lot cleverer than Rory Stewart thinks he is. To discuss this, let's talk to the chief political writer at Spiked Online, author as well, Brendan O'Neill. Welcome to the show, Brendan.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Very well, thank you for joining me. Yeah, you wrote about this in The Telegraph, how J.D. Vance basically just trampled all over Rory Stewart. Rory Stewart thinking he's clever, but he's not as clever as J.D. Vance, if we're going to get into a league table. And J.D. Vance eventually concluding magnificently that I've said it before and I'll say it again. The problem with Rory and people like him is that he has an IQ of 110 and thinks he has an IQ of 130. And he goes on to say it is this false arrogance that has driven so much elite failure over the last 40 years. It's a very good point, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think J.D. Vance nailed him. He really nailed Rory Stewart. And J.D. Vance came off much better in that debate. He clearly knows more about Christianity and the history of Christianity than Rory Stewart does. But more importantly, he really summed up that class of politician that Rory Stewart belongs to, that very patrician elite who thinks they are cleverer than everyone else, who look down their noses at us, who assume that they have the right to run the country better than the rest of us because they're so much smarter, they come from better backgrounds, they went to the right colleges at Oxford and so on. He just really nailed it. He really nailed that kind of British elitism, but more importantly, that kind of old expert class that we've all been labouring under for the past 10 or 20 years, who think that they know everything and we know nothing. And J.D. Vance showed that those old emperors have no clothes.
Yeah, the row was about J.D. Vance kind of basically saying, well, defining Christian love, saying it's about your family. He said you love your family, then you love your neighbour, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that you can focus on the rest of the world. As you wrote with superb haughtiness, Stewart came back saying J.D. Vance's version of Christian love is more pagan tribal than Christian. Anyway, Vance brilliantly fired back, just Google Ordo Amoris, thereby indicating that he wasn't quite the dim hillbilly that the superior Eton-educated, Oxford-educated Rory Stewart took him for. And he then ended up humiliating Rory. But then again, Rory's very good at humiliating himself, isn't he? Yep. Remember his superb prediction that Kamala Harris will absolutely walk the American election. The only basis for that was that he wanted her to, but he had no other facts. He's not as bright as he thinks he is he?
No, and this is a man who once made a series for Radio 4 called The History of Ignorance, and he rather shows his own ignorance quite a lot. So he said he would bet loads of money on Kamala winning the presidential election last year. That didn't happen. He came off worse in this spat about Christianity with J.D. Vance. He just doesn't really know what he's talking about. And, you know, there's a certain kind of liberal who thinks Jesus Christ was just like them. You know, it seems if you look at that discussion, it looks like Rory Stewart thinks Jesus was some happy, clappy, hippie, open borders liberal. He probably would have voted Remain. You know, they have this idea that Jesus is a perfect reflection of their own political prejudices. And, you know, he would have been some kind of wet, woke hippie. Those of us who were brought up Roman Catholic remember that we have a jealous God and an angry God, and that Jesus was actually sometimes a pretty fierce warrior and not just all about happy, clappy love. So Rory Stewart just doesn't know the truth of the New Testament or the history of Christianity. And watching him getting his behind handed to him by this populist vice president from America, this former hillbilly, this man-made good, it was a really glorious sight.
It really, really was. And I think that this kind of superior attitude from people like Rory Stewart, from our political elite, as I said earlier, many of whom live in North London, read The Guardian, watch the BBC, have their own dinner parties, they're a very insular community. I think that's what informs not just this government, but previous government's approach to the migrant crisis. I was just discussing this very issue. Today it's emerged that local councils around the country have in the past year spent £141 million, you know, on things like playstations and yoga sessions and tours of Anfield Football Ground for our illegal migrants who've broken into the country. So this continues despite the fury of the people, and it's because people like like Keir Starmer, for that matter David Cameron, even Boris Johnson, they just sort of think, oh, don't worry about the people. They'll come along for the ride. They'll do what they're told. We'll just carry on and ignore them. That is what is informing certainly Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper's approach to this migrant crisis, because they're doing nothing whatsoever to stop it. In fact, as I just indicated, they're encouraging it. And what I think is happening now, though, I think it is coming to a head. I think the people have had just about enough of this, and it could spell downfall for Keir and Cooper and the gang, because they can't stop ignoring us in the way that they traditionally have.
I really agree with that. I think Trump and other phenomenon have helped to break the spell of wokeness. I think wokeness doesn't work in the way that it used to, by which I mean, you know, this really patrician idea that there are certain things we shouldn't talk about. You know, us plebs, we shouldn't concern ourselves with the rape gangs or mass immigration or radical Islam or any of these other difficult problems. We should leave those to the expert classes. And that's just not washing anymore. You know, remember when the rape gang first came back into the news at the start of this year, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper and others just tried to brush it aside like they always have done. They said, listen, we're dealing with it, don't worry about it. But that just didn't work like it did in the past. And I increasingly feel that, you know, if you criticize anything to do with radical Islam, they'll call you Islamophobic. If you criticize mass immigration, they call you xenophobic. If you even state a biological truth, they'll call you transphobic. Those are all the insults they used to use to keep us in our place. But I feel really strongly that it's not working anymore. It just doesn't cut through in the way that it used to. And people are speaking out regardless of what the political establishment says to us. I think that's going to be a real problem for Keir Starmer, because there are so many things he would rather the public didn't talk about, but we're increasingly demanding the right to do so. And that's going to cause trouble for this government.
And the government is currently in the process of coming up with a new definition for Islamophobia. I would argue we didn't need a definition in the first place. We should never have invented that word. If you want to know a problem that we've got in this country, it's called anti-Semitism, but I don't see the Labour Party going hell for leather to tackle that genuine problem. But Islamophobia, I mean, they've got skin in this game. They need the votes of the Muslim community. However, this definition of Islamophobia, whatever they come up with, and I'm afraid it might be Dominic Grieve who's in charge of this endeavour, it's going to be a restriction on freedom of speech. It will restrict, in my view, people like you and I saying, don't quite like the idea of burqas. I think it demeans women and it's bad for identification. Don't like that. And also, it will criminalise people like that guy a couple of days ago in Manchester who, as a political demonstration, protest, set fire to the Quran. Now, if you look at what the Manchester police said about that, it's almost as if he committed a crime. Well, he hasn't. Yeah. He hasn't. And never should that be a crime in this country. We got rid of our blasphemy laws in 2008. There's no doubt that significant swathes of our Muslim community, they want the blasphemy laws back, so that if you burn the Quran, you go to jail. And that cannot be allowed to happen. We must be... I'm not saying that everybody go out and burn a Quran, but you should be able to burn a Quran, you should be able to burn a Bible, or whatever the hell it is you want to burn. And yet, Labour, I know, are edging in on making that sort of protest illegal. In other words, crushing freedom of speech, freedom of expression.
Absolutely right. And I think Islamophobia is basically such a con word. It's not a real thing. Of course, there is such a thing as anti-Muslim bigotry. And if any of us ever hears that or sees it, we should call it out. There's no question about that. But Islamophobia is one of those slippery terms that is really just invented to control public discussion about Islam, public discussion about Islamic terrorism or the Quran or any other aspect of that religion. But we should be absolutely free to criticize all prophets, gods, books and beliefs. That is a fundamental tenet of the free society. I really agree with you that the Labour government isn't treating anti-Semitism nearly as seriously as it should be, and instead it's obsessing over so-called Islamophobia. You know, we all remember seeing those hate marches, those so-called pro-Palestine marches over the past 16 months, where people said the most obscene things about Jewish people. They held up anti-Semitic placards. Some people chanted for the death of Jews and for the destruction of the Jewish state. Very often the police just stood back. They didn't take any action. Yet as soon as a man burnt a Quran, they swarmed on him, put him in handcuffs and dragged him off to the cells. That is two-tier policing summed up, where you can apparently insult the Jews to your heart's content, but God forbid if you ever do anything to defile the Quran. That is such a dangerous game that the establishment is playing, and we really need to push back against it.
I think it's one of the central scourges of British culture right now, indeed Western culture generally. It is this ever-present fear on the part of usually hand-wringing, middle-class, left-of-centre people that they may be accused of Islamophobia or racism. I mean, we know about the rape gang scandal, the grooming gang scandal, as it's euphemistically called. That was allowed to prosper. It wasn't just allowed to go on, it was allowed to prosper. They think as many as 250,000 kids, white, vulnerable girls, may have been abused or raped during those dark years. And why was it allowed to prosper? Because coppers, social workers, teachers, local politicians, the great and the good, were terrified to say, actually, maybe we should arrest some of these people, maybe we should stop this, but if we do, we might look like racists. That might explain, Brendan, why from 2008 to 2013, when the rape scandal was going great guns, was happening at a rate of knots, that the Director of Public Prosecutions then, a certain Mr. Keir Starmer, was not responsible for the prosecution of one single grooming gang rapist. That might explain it, right?
You know, what has happened in this country over the past 20 years or more is something really, really shocking, which is that the political establishment put its own reputation above the safety of working class girls. They said, listen, defending our own backsides from the accusation of racism or Islamophobia or anything else, that is more important than defending white working class girls, some of the most vulnerable girls in society, from rape, and in some cases from murder. You know, a very serious and grave calculation was made, and these girls were sacrificed at the altar of political correctness. It's such a wake-up call to the whole of Britain to know that we live under political establishments that value their own virtue and their own reputation more than they do the lives of working-class girls. That should really hit home for everyone. And Keir Starmer was involved in that, local councils, local police forces, virtually every wing of the modern establishment. And that's why this is one of the scandals we can't let go. We have to keep talking about this, whatever the government would rather we did.
Last question to you, since we started talking about the political class. Do you remember the last Prime Minister who thought that basically the lockdown rules, the COVID laws and rules and regulations were for little people? They weren't really for very important politicians in Westminster. This was a guy who had a glass of champagne and a slice of cake at a colleague's birthday party in Number 10 during the height of the COVID crisis. His name was Boris Johnson. Now, he couldn't believe that that would defenestrate his career, that that would end his career as a politician. It did. Keir Starmer, again, I think suffering from a similar kind of elitism. I don't think he can quite spot that he might be in serious trouble with this vocal coach. The fact that his vocal coach, Leonie, what was her name, Mellinger, travelled from Brighton to London, first class, going through several tiers, remember the tiers, to go to Labour headquarters on Christmas Eve 2020 to give the Labour leaders, Keir Starmer, a lesson on how to deliver speeches, because he was about to treat us with his response to Boris Johnson's leave deal. Now, the thing is, Boris Johnson never, I know this from doing this job, Boris Johnson never understood the nature of people's fury. He kept saying, it was just a piece of cake and a glass of champagne. What people were saying is, look, while you were having a drink with your mates, having the time of your life, I wasn't allowed to see my old mum at Christmas. I couldn't see my loved ones. I'm not allowed to go out for a drink. I'm expected to obey the rules, but you're not? That's what got rid of Boris. And I think Keir Starmer, suffering from that elitist syndrome, doesn't realise the depth of trouble he's in over this.
Yeah, you know what really hit home for people during all those scandals is just the idea that it's one rule for them and another rule for us. And people hate that. They hate that. And even worse, these were rules that the political class had just made up at that very moment, in that very scandal, that very crisis. They said, right, we're bringing in loads of new rules, and if you don't abide by them, people will die. So we were kind of scared into abiding by these new rules. At precisely the same time, they weren't abiding by them. They were doing their own thing. They were having their little parties and having their speech coaches and having flings, as we know from that guy at Imperial, whose name I've mercifully forgotten, who was going around visiting...
Ferguson, wasn't it? Ferguson.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You know, they were doing their own thing. And,
the bonking boffin, I remember, as we called it.
That's right. And the rest of us were scared to go out more than once a day in case our neighbours squealed us up to that hotline that they set up. So that's what people dislike. And it brings us back to the idea of the patrician elites who think they can boss us around. They think they can live by their own rules and enforce rules on the rest of us. They think they're the experts and we're the dumb plebs. They think they know how to run the country and we don't know how to run a bath. That's what they think. And I think the more that we get this populist pushback against that and the more that we get ordinary people speaking out against it, the better.
Absolutely, Brendan. It's really good to have you on the show again. Great to talk. Come back on again soon. That's Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online, broadcaster and, of course, excellent author too. Now, stay tuned. We have much still to come. Don't forget we're taking your calls in about 10 minutes. So that's 0344 499 1000. Next up, we're going to talk about the madness of diversity in modern policing. So stay tuned for that.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about the extraordinary cost of diversity-obsessed policing. West Yorkshire Police, thanks to our next guest, can be revealed to have spent just over £1,008,208 on diversity. Over £1 million in a year. This included the head of diversity and equality and inclusion. He or she earns £91,536 a year. Did you get that? Is that the sort of salary you get? 91,536. I think that's more than an MP. So that's the head of diversity, equality and inclusion at West Yorkshire Police. The positive action uniformed inspector, another one of these diversity jobs, they get £94,272. That's definitely more than an MP. And the West Yorkshire Police alone spent on external DEI training courses, that's diversity, equality and inclusivity, of course. They spent £361,000 on those. So that all comes to just over £1 million in a year. There are 43 constabularies in England and Wales. And as my next guest has already told me, his guess is they're all spending a similar amount. A warm welcome, friend of the show, to former Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville. Welcome again, Mike. This is just mad. £1 million. This is a police force. All police forces moan about never having enough money. Trouble is, we're underfunded. Well, here's a way that West Yorkshire Police alone could save more than £1 million. Stop all this diversity claptrap. It's insane, isn't it?
It's out of control, isn't it? I've got some hope. You know, we heard about Wes Streeting, the health minister today, saying that, you know, it's got to stop in the NHS. But something has got to be done. We need a Trump-like solution where it's just absolutely banned. Because the moment unless you tell them they're not going to do it and you're going to forbid them, they'll continue doing it. What you have is a whole generation of senior police officers who have been promoted on celebrating diversity and not catching criminals. So they'll tell you that this is all for the community, this will make things better. 20 years ago, there was none of this. And the police solved 4 or 5 times more crimes, and the public trust and confidence in policing was far higher than the levels which it's collapsed to now. So what has it achieved? If a business looked at itself and thought, do you know what? I've been spending this money, £1 million a year, and my profits are down, and the customers don't like us as much as 20 years ago when we didn't do this. They would have stopped doing it a long time ago. And of course, on there you've got an inspector, a sergeant, and 6 police constables. What would the public in West Yorkshire want them doing? Painting rainbows, talking at events, or would they rather have them on the streets, possibly catching some of these grooming gangs or some burglars, robbers, rapists, or whatever else? It is outrageous, Kevin, and it needs a crackdown, but I fear under this government there'll be no such thing.
And this involves around about 20 jobs, the lowest paid of which is £30,000. Most of them around about the 50,000. There's one here for, as I say, there's 94,000, 91,000, 57,000. I mean, these are all sizable salaries. And this, of course, is the same West Yorkshire Police who last summer in the Hare Heels riots in Leeds went in, took one look at the ethnic rioters and said, oh, it's people of colour, let's pull out and leave them to it, which is what they did. So the next day, everybody said, look at the extent of the destruction. They've destroyed this entire community. Look! Well, they wouldn't have been such an extent of a destruction had the police not have pulled out entirely for 5 hours and let the rioters get on with it.
It's truly shocking, and we heard Brendan before say about two-tier police, and here again is a fantastic example of such when you compare it with the way they dealt with the disorder in Southport and other places. But as I've said, the public would be outraged because this isn't just the police. You just got to imagine that the fire brigade are going to be the same, the armed forces, you've got the passport office, any government agency, the council will be full of this. All the things we pay for where we expect basic services to done. All we want, I imagine if you're white or black, gay or straight, fat or thin, whatever you classify yourself as, you'd rather have the police making the streets in our homes safer than all this nonsense. But the trouble is there's a lot of people making a lot of money out of division, out of dividing us. So instead of being unified and being a community, these people have divided us and filled their own pockets at the same time. And it's achieved nothing. It hasn't made policing any better. As I've said, trust and confidence in policing is at utter rock bottom. And it's an absolute shame because British policing used to be seen as the best in the world. And we had no DEI training or any DEI 90 grand a year managers at that time either.
Yeah, I mean, diversity, I'm not against the principle of diversity. That's to give everyone a fair break, regardless of creed, colour or class. It started, DEI, the whole concept started way back in the 1960s, during which time it was a good thing. It has now sort of mushroomed into this monster that is the very opposite of fairness and diversity. I mean, if you're a white, middle-class, middle-aged bloke who happens to be a heterosexual, that's an oppressed minority these days. You don't have any chance at all. And what about recently? I know we're switching countries here, but I think the whole syndrome was summed up in the horror of the Los Angeles fires, my old hometown. I was very sad to see it going up in flames. And then we learned that the three top people in the Los Angeles Fire Department, the LAFD, were all of whom were on about $500,000, $400,000, $350,000. They're all three of them. The first, number one, the number two, and the number three in the LAFD, lesbians. All three of them. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Firefighters. Yeah. But most importantly, Kevin, they weren't even firefighters. They were paramedics who saw a chance to get promoted. So that just sums it up. Yeah. They can do what they want to each other in bed, but if you to be the head of the fire brigade, sure, you've got to be able to fight fires. Madness.
Well, exactly. So, I don't want to cast aspersions about them. Just maybe there's 1,000,000 to 1 chance they are the best three firefighters known to the Los Angeles Fire Department, but somehow I doubt it, and somehow I'm pretty confident that I bet you there's a lot of people far better qualified than those three to run the LAFD. But they got their jobs on the back of diversity. So I'm saying that the brightest and the best are not getting the top jobs anymore because of diversity. It is like it's a perversion, isn't it?
It is a perversion. And what you have as well is that everybody thinks the same. So you go in a meeting and they're all middle class. So whether they're Asian, black, white or whatever, they're all middle class. They all have the same view. So the one thing that's lacking is diversity of thought. So when the Metropolitan Police has got all its troubles, it's not solving crime, the solution is to have a race action plan and a new diversity directorate. And 10 people will be sat in the meeting when this is announced, and no one puts their hand up and says, you know what, the emperor hasn't got any clothes on, this is a load of nonsense. Because that would ruin your promotion prospects, you see. And so everybody agrees. So the key element that's missing from any diversity is diversity of thought. All the people in these public sector organisations think the way the Guardian has dictated. They believe it's a cult. They'll believe in net zero, they'll believe in DEI, and all the rest of it. So mass immigration, globalism. And the problem is there's no one there to say, sorry, this isn't right. Somebody needs to be in that room who says, no, this is a lot of old rubbish. Let's get back to basics and make communities safer.
I mean, it's a forlorn hope, but I wish to God we had a Donald Trump. to drive a freight truck through all of this because it's becoming a real problem. And the last point, Mike, you mentioned to me, I mean, there are 43 constabularies in England and Wales. We have focused on just one, fairly big one to be fair, but you can rest assured, can't you, that per capita each one of these police forces is spending a similar amount on diversity, right?
Absolutely. And if you look at the Met is about 5 or 6 times bigger than the next Manchester Police, which is slightly bigger than the West Yorkshire force. So if £1 million is being spent in West Yorkshire, how much is being spent in Manchester? How much is being spent in London? London in particular will be, you know, I would imagine it's tens of millions of pounds.
Should have seen me this morning adding up your figures. By the way, we should stress that you are the one that put in that Freedom of Information request to Yorkshire Police, and very good work by you. But you should have seen me trying to add it up this morning. It was a sad sight, but I think I got there in the end, and it came to more than £1 million. Mike, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Come back any old time, and I'm sure you will. That's Mike Neville, former Scotland Yard detective. What do you think about that? More than £1 million on diversity, nearly 20 employees for a single police force. And as Mike says, you know, that's West Yorkshire. That's not as big as the Met, not as big as Manchester Police Force, probably the other big cities as well, Liverpool, you know, maybe even Bristol. You know, fortunes being spent on diversity. A lot of them uniformed officers or even non-uniformed officers. Wouldn't they be better employed, in your view, out there catching bad guys, you know, fighting crime, what we kind of naively used to think the police force was supposed to be about? What do you reckon? 03444991000. Your calls when we come back. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Donald Trump, the charge continues apace. He's just signed a document stopping American engagement with the United Nations Human Rights Council, claiming that America's funding of that is disproportionate. So there you go. Another human rights organisation loses the support of America. These human rights organisations, they just cost us loads of money. They wrap us up in red tape. And they tend to work against the interests of our country, Britain, America and the like Western countries. So Donald's done it again. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking about foreign aid. Elon Musk, who is the head of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, appointed as the first buddy by Donald Trump, has driven a truck through all of America's diversity, or the government's diversity industry. That's basically been shut down. And he has now shut down USAID, which is the kind of $60 billion plus equivalent of Britain's foreign aid. We give £15 billion of foreign aid to foreign countries every year, and we are borrowing at a dangerous rate. In order to give this money abroad, we have to borrow. We borrow vast amounts of money, putting us into hock, risking national bankruptcy, so we can give money to foreign countries. You know, virtue, oh, there you go, be kind. It's madness, madness. We'll be doing that later on, so stay tuned for that. 0344 499 1000. And let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Steve in Leeds. Hello, Steve. You want to talk about Islamophobia?
Yeah, good evening, Kev. Yeah, there's 2 points I want to make. The first one is about Angela Rayner promoting this idea that we need to protect the Muslim faith, the Islamic faith, right? So a couple of points I'd like to make on that, just very quickly, right? Angela Rayner is a woman, yeah? If she promotes the benefits of the Islamic faith, she wouldn't have a job, right? And all her gay mates in Islington wouldn't be alive, yeah? Because
and her heterosexual mates in Islington.
Yeah, the first thing we're going to do is take over. So to me, I'm a white Anglo-Saxon male in his 60s. If I walked out in the street and said women should be stoned for having an affair, girls shouldn't be educated, and bear in mind 20 years ago, we took a girl from Pakistan who was shot outside her school and gave her safety and her family in this country. That was from Pakistan. We paid for her operation. Yeah. Yeah. So if I stood in the street and said gays should be hung, women should be stoned, women can't drive, they should wear hijab, I'd get locked up. But as long as I
hate crimes, they'd be hate crimes, wouldn't they?
As long as I cloak it in the veil of it's my religious freedom, it's allowed. Yeah. Yeah. My second point, which is rather a jokey point, is imagine this scenario for Sir Keir Starmer. Yeah. A gays for Palestine transgender person drops a Quran accidentally outside a mosque in a puddle. Yeah. Surrounded by a crowd and murdered. The police can't do anything because, hey, you'll upset that community, but what do I do about the fact he's transgender? Yeah. And what's the Keir Starmer going to do?
Yeah, you mean he's sort of lost down a woke rabbit hole? Yeah, God, yeah. That would be very fun to see. Steve, very good points. Just to leave you with this recollection. You remember Angela Rayner, whose constituency Ashton-under-Lyne has a massive Muslim element to it, massive Muslim community. She goes to meet the local Muslim community leaders, you know, on whose vote she relies for a position in Parliament, and she's sitting there in this room full of about 100 blokes talking to the Muslim community. She's the only woman. So that sums up what we're talking about. Islam, many of us in the West don't think it gives a fair shot to women. Why do they have to cover themselves up? Doesn't that demean women? I don't know. That's what I think. But of course, others would not agree. But I've got the right to think that, at least I have at the moment. But you leave it to Angela Rayner's Council on Islamophobia, and fairly soon I won't be able to say that. Trust me, that's the problem. Good call from Steve there. When we come back, we'll be dealing with Valdo Calicone, the Nottingham killer. We're going to talk to one of the parents of one of the victims about what they feel about the fact the NHS will not reveal details of the catalogue of errors that led to this guy being able to commit those terrible murders back in June 2023. Stay tuned.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. If you cast your mind back to June 2023, I can still remember it myself as that shocking day when Nottingham went into lockdown. A madman was on the loose with a knife. Valdo Caliconi turned out to be his name. He killed three people. And they were, of course, students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley-Coomer and janitor Ian Coates, all of whose families were very upset by what happened to this guy, Valdo Caliconi. When he ended up going into court, one of the mother, Emma Webber, the mother of Barnaby, said this was a trial by doctors. Basically, this guy was allowed to plead guilty to manslaughter due to diminished responsibility because he had a history of mental illness. Now, today, we've learned that the NHS will not release the full report of the failings in the treatment of this triple killer, Valdo Caliconi, because of his right to patient confidentiality. He, of course, is serving an indefinite hospital order in a prison hospital, basically. This decision seems to me to prioritise his rights over justice for the families of the victims. I think they have a right to see the catalogue of errors that allowed this man, this monster, to roam the streets of Nottingham and to unleash that horrible day of terror. Let's talk now. I'm very pleased that he's agreed to join us. He's the father of Grace O'Malley-Coomer, Dr. Sanjoy Coomer. Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
It's my pleasure.
Your thoughts? I mean, this guy, Caliconi, seems to have got such special treatment from day one, but now there's a 200-page report which you would be particularly interested to see, which chronicles this catalogue of errors. This guy was a paranoid schizophrenic who showed many signs of aggression and who refused to take his vital medication. And despite that, they basically released him from treatment onto the streets. Now, it's a 200-page report. I think they are conceding they may release the odd page or two. But I say the NHS here is prioritising the alleged rights of a triple murderer to privacy over your rights as the grieving parents of the victims to know what went wrong here. You must be furious.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right, Kevin. There is clear case law where the public interest comes before anyone else's confidentiality. And in a case like this, where public interest and public safety is at the heart of the matter, there is no reason at all for Caliconi to have any confidentiality whatsoever, because we all need to learn lessons from his case. And all of the mental health trusts across England need to learn vital lessons that are well overdue. There hasn't been any change to any of this and mental-related homicide for 30 years in our country. And it's only when you pick out people from within a report do you actually change a system? I think people seem to not understand that a system is made out of people. And if you don't hold those people accountable, you will never change the system. And that's actually what's been going wrong in our country for a long time. We need to hold people accountable. And part of this report, I'm hoping will hold people accountable. And I'm also hoping last-minute pressure from us, the Secretary of State for Health, and from Hudgell solicitors who are representing us will actually...
Hang on, I think we've frozen there. Can we unfreeze Dr. Kumar as soon as possible? Typical, isn't it? We'll get back to him, but as I was saying there, you know, this guy Kalakoni, you know, this is allegedly due to his right to privacy. But what's more important here? The privacy rights of a triple murderer, a man who terrified an entire city on a day of horror, you know, who left 3 families grieving for the rest of their lives. What's more important, his rights or their rights? Haven't they got a right to see this? I think they have. I think we're getting Dr. Kumar back, are we? We'll get him back as soon as we can. Your feelings, let me know what you think about this. 03444 991 1000, because I think this is disgraceful. As I say, at the time of the trial, if any of you recall, this wasn't really a trial. It just never really went to trial. And Emma Webber, Barnaby's mother, she said this was a trial by doctors and that they felt that they were deprived of justice. You know, why is that? Why is it that suddenly a court can just be about doctors? Oh, diminished responsibility. Well, you know, all murderers, you know, all people like Kalakoni, they often claim mental problems, mental issues, but, you know, they're still made to stand trial. You know, any serial killer is probably not by main definitions, most definitions, a sane person, but we still make them stand trial. So why did Kalakoni get away with it? He is now resting in... Is he okay? We can't get him back in picture, but Dr. Kumar is back on the phone. Yes, sorry about that, Dr. Kumar. Just at the right point, we lost you. But I mean, as I say, Emma Webber, Barnaby's mother, said at the time after the trial that she felt this was a trial by doctors and that you, the grieving families, were denied justice. Do you still feel that he should have been tried like most murderers? Because, you know, all murderers aren't exactly sane. Certainly people who stab 3 people in the streets of a place like Nottingham in a single day. He's not sane, but we normally would try them as a sane person. Why didn't we? Do you feel deprived still about that?
I think Emma Webber was absolutely right when she said this was a trial. Well, there was one witness, which was our prosecution psychiatrist, who we believe came to a wrong conclusion about this person being treatment resistant. What I'd like to say to everyone is that the Mental Health Trust in Nottingham, the Care Quality Commission, and the NHS England report will show that Kalakane was in no way treatment resistant. What he did do is he refused to take his treatment. So he was culpable for not taking his treatment, and he should have been treated like any other murderer. And we are going to prove that, and we are going to take huge steps, again, for public safety, to see that someone like him is never released. His sentence should be re-reviewed. What we wanted was a hybrid order. We never minded him getting the medical treatment that he may need acutely, but ultimately he should have got a life sentence for murdering 3 people and our daughter. 3 innocent people were murdered in the cold light of day, and this man deserves a life sentence. He's evil. He should never be let in. And the people who kept this evil person out, the psychiatrists who were responsible for keeping this evil person out in the community, to murder and to take away our loved ones, they should also face accountability for their actions. They didn't act in a way where they were going to think that Kalakane was going to meet their daughter or their son or their father in the street next. They just couldn't care less, and they need to be held accountable.
Do you feel, Dr. Kumar, that, I mean, while droning on about his right, patient confidentiality, that there's an element of this that the NHS don't want to release this file because it will humiliate them in their catalogue of errors that they made with this man?
Well, that's exactly what they should do. They should be humiliated. And no other mental health trust in England should ever make the same mistakes again. No parent in England should go through what hell we are going through. And you are absolutely right. They may feel that the standard is so poor across the country. But the point really, I've got to say, Kevin, is that if you don't hold people accountable, you will not change a system. My lasting words that I want for your program are, a system is made out of people. If you don't hold them accountable, there's no point trying to change the system. Systems are made out of people.
They certainly are. And, fairly sort of obvious question, but, I mean, every day must be painful for you and all the other families of the victims, because this was so horrific.
Kevin, we should be grieving right now, but the minute we stood on the steps of the court after the hearing, we have had to do nothing but fight. We've had to fight to get to the point that we are now, and we will fight till the point that we get safety for the public in our country, because we have nothing else to fight for. This is how we represent the kids we lost and how the kids' family represent the father they lost. We want everlasting change. We want our country to be one of the safest places in the world. We want to affect knife crime. We want to make it totally unacceptable to carry a knife in this country.
I've got to go, Dr. Kumar, but please come on again soon. Dr. Sanjoy Kumar there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This
We're just talking to Grace O'Malley Kumar's father there, Dr. Kumar, and him pointing out that the families of the victims of the Nottingham killer, the three families, I mean, they were they say, and I've got a lot of sympathy, they were deprived of justice. That Valdo Calaconi, this lunatic who killed their children and the janitors, in terms of him, he was the father of some kids. So these families, they suddenly had imposed upon them a trial by doctors. He's diminished responsibility, mental disabilities, no problem. He's going to a secure hospital. Well, you know, lots of people, you could do that for loads of people. Why was that? They were deprived of justice then, and now they can't get to see the 200-page report chronicling the catalogue of errors that led to this paranoid, schizophrenic, aggressive lunatic's release from treatment. He was wandering around. So there's a 200-page report by the NHS into all the mistakes they made, and the grieving families can't get to see it because the NHS says Valdo Calaconi, triple murderer, has a right to patient confidentiality. What about these families' rights to justice? What do you think? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Shouldn't they get to see this report? Of course they should. This is outrageous. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think. Also keen to hear you. Your thoughts on the fact we're giving £141 million, or local councils last year gave £141 million to migrants for things like playstations, yoga sessions, driving lessons, Tai Chi sessions, and so on and so forth. This is insane, isn't it? Why? Plus the fact, you know, we're spending billions anyway, 8 billion a year or whatever it is, putting them up in expensive hotels, giving them free food, free lawyers, free doctors, free dentists, free everything, 45 quid a week, giving them all that, but also playstations, yoga sessions, free trips around Anfield football ground, and so on and so forth. If you think that's insane, give me a call. Or if you think it's great, give me a call. Can't imagine too many people will be ringing on that score. But let me know what you think about this. 0344 499 1000. Before we get to any of that, let's talk about the USAID program now over in America. Now, we have a foreign aid budget here. So Britain, we hand about £15 billion a year to foreign countries, developing countries, what we used to call third world countries, you know, to help them, improve conditions, tackle poverty, all that sort of thing. Not necessarily against such generosity, such charity, but given that Britain is borrowing more money than it ever has before, some say an almost suicidal amount of money, trillions. Our national debt is just astronomical, and we borrow more and more every day, more than ever before. You know, we're borrowing vast amounts of money, threatening the financial security of this country, to then give away £15 billion. Oh, can you borrow that money? All right, here you go. It's yours. I mean, really? Really? I mean, we have a government that's constantly complaining, oh, and the financial black hole, the Tories left a big financial black hole, £22 billion, we're so hard up. Well, stop giving £15 billion to foreign countries. By the way, they've also, this year, allotted an extra £11.6 billion for green projects in developing countries. So this year, we're giving, bad maths coming into play now, £26.6 billion to foreign countries, you know, just because we're nice people, we're being kind. £26.6 billion. And we're borrowing money to a dangerous level. Now, in America, they put a stop to all that. I mean, we learnt last week that Joe Biden, for example, as part of what they call it USAID, or one word, USAID, as in the America's foreign aid budget. They, for example, last year they spent $50 million on condoms for Gaza. $50 million on condoms for Gaza. I mean, make of that what you will. So basically, Trump's come in. He's appointed Elon Musk, the world's richest man, head of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. So Elon's got to go around finding places where the government is wasting money. And now, not unreasonably, he believes that perhaps $50 million on condoms for Gaza is not the best way to spend American taxpayers' money. Right now, Elon has sent in a squad, apparently, of university-aged tech prodigies to dismantle US aid. They're called the Muscovites. They're handpicked. They're all between the age of 19 and 24. And as I said earlier, they are driving a truck through America's $60 billion plus a year foreign aid budget. All US aid staff have been told to stay at home until the full review is complete. I mean, you would kind of ask, why doesn't Britain do the same? Why don't we do the same? We're hoping to speak to Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Got a few technical problems. We'll get hold of him as soon as we can. But in the meantime, let me know, why don't we stop giving £15 billion, or this year £26.6 billion to foreign countries, just out of our own generosity, out of the goodness of our hearts, when the country's in big financial trouble? We're borrowing a suicidal amount of money and then giving it away. You know, don't borrow the money and don't give it away. There's my solution. What do you think? 03444991000 while we try and get hold of Alan. Let's take some calls. Let's go to Jacqueline in Kent. Hello, Jacqueline. What would you like to say?
Well, I was just saying that I think all people that commit murder, definitely commit murder, all rights should be taken away from them. To allow them confidentiality is ridiculous. That was my phone call.
Well, Jacqueline, I think you've got a very good point. I just feel that this is a case of officialdom placing their priorities in exactly the wrong place. Their priority should be justice for the families. These families, these poor families of these three innocent victims of this lunatic, this paranoid schizophrenic who ran around with a knife, killing these three people, are not allowed to see this report. 200-page report. What it chronicles, what it lists are the catalogue of errors made by the NHS, which led to Valdo Calicone roaming the streets. He refused to take his medicine. He was released from treatment. He showed signs of aggression. You can say that again, can't you? Don't you think, Jacqueline, that what the NHS should do is let these poor people, the grieving families, see this 200-page report?
I think all people that commit murder, definitely commit murder, all rights should be taken away from them. To allow them confidentiality is ridiculous. That was my phone call.
OK, fair enough, Jacqueline. You got the radio in the background, which makes it sound a bit odd, but we got the point. Thank you very, very much, Jacqueline in Kent there, listening to herself on the radio. Always screws up the calls. When you do that, folks, turn it off. Well, either the radio or the television, because it kind of echoes and goes like that. But we got the point that Jacqueline's making, and it was a good point. Gordon is in Sutton. Is that in Sutton, Surrey, Gordon?
It is.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's a bit of information for you. I used to be the chief reporter of the Sutton Herald.
Really?
Yeah, about 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So I know the area well, but you want to talk about the Nottingham killer?
I do. I take slight issue with said. I personally believe that they're not releasing this report to protect his feelings. They're not releasing the report because they don't want the public to see how much they screwed up.
Yeah, that's what I said to Dr. Kumar, Grace O'Malley Kumar's father. They're saying, "Oh, it's patient confidentiality."
Yeah, my arse.
I think you might think that. I couldn't possibly comment, but I think you're right. That they're claiming it's to do with patient confidentiality, because I think if they open the files to the public, it will reveal the most appalling errors in the treatment of this guy. So that they're sort of covering their own backs here. And I just think it's incredibly wrong. When are these people going to get justice? And why, by the way, Gordon, did they get a trial by doctors? Why were they suddenly told, oh, well, this isn't normal, you're not going to get a trial? Basically, this guy, diminished responsibility, he's going to a prison hospital where he'll have a cushy time for the rest of his life. Why did they do that, do you think?
Well, I personally think it's self-evident. It mirrors the case in Sheffield yesterday. You know, they'll find a million ways not to shine the light on the reality of what is happening.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that this is the establishment closing its doors to any public scrutiny. That is what I think this is about, and I think on reflection, that may have been the reason that he didn't really have a criminal trial. I mean, this guy committed one of the worst crimes of recent times, of recent history, murdering 3 people on the streets of Nottingham in the middle of the summer. And he didn't even get a trial. Oh, it's diminished responsibility. He's going straight to a prison hospital. The people, the families of those victims, look at them there. They did not get justice there. As Barnaby's mother, Emma, said, this was a trial by doctors. We didn't get justice, and I think they deserve it. But it looks like they're going to campaign, and they're not going to give this one up, and I think that's a good idea. Gordon, give my regards to the mean streets of Sutton. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Ring me again. Gordon in Sutton there. Going to go to break now. We'll take more of your messages and I'll read some of your texts and WhatsApps that you've sent in. So much still to come. Stay tuned.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I mean, the breaking news today is Donald Trump has just signed a document pulling America out of the United Nations Human Rights Council. It will no longer engage with that organisation because Donald says the states' funding is disproportionate. But basically, this is him saying no more human rights, no more wokery, and so on and so forth. So it continues a theme of this new presidency, this dynamic new presidency. Whether you like what he's doing or not, you can't deny it's dynamic. Another day, another executive order. This one to pull out of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Meanwhile, as I said earlier, Elon Musk's Doge operation, the Department of Government Efficiency, he has sent in a squad of Muscovites. They're all aged between 19 and 24. They're university-aged tech prodigies, technology prodigies, and they're going to dismantle US aid, which is the American equivalent of Britain's foreign aid budget. America gives around about $60 billion dollars a year to foreign countries, and frankly, Donald Trump isn't going to do that. He's going to wind their financial neck in to a great degree. Elon Musk said that the US Aid Department was rotten to the core. He expected to find a rotten worm in the apple. He said the entire apple is rotten. So they've got to rip it to pieces, he said, and start again. Meanwhile, we continue over here to spend £15 billion a year on foreign aid when we are a financial basket case, borrowing money left, right and centre just to stay afloat. Let's talk to, he stepped in at the last moment, valiantly, political strategist Pete Barnes. Hi, Pete. Thanks for stepping up to the plate at short notice.
No problem. How are you doing, Kev? Nice to see you.
Yeah, always a pleasure, mate. Musk, Elon Musk, has sent in this squad of Muscovites, all aged between 19 and 24, and they're driving a truck through America's $60 billion plus a year foreign aid budget. They're going to stop it, basically. Meanwhile, over here, we continue to spend £15 billion a year to give to countries, developing countries, for various projects to help them fight poverty, disease, etc., etc. This year, it just so happens we're sending another $11.6 billion abroad to help developing countries with their green projects. So this year, we're giving £26.6 billion to foreign countries. Now, I'm all for that spirit of generosity, of altruism by one of the world's biggest economies, but the British economy is in deep trouble. We are borrowing money currently at a rate unprecedented, unknown before, dangerous levels, many think. Our national debt is astronomical now, and I wondered if you, as part of the Westminster community, could explain to a simpleton like me the logic of desperately borrowing money to give it away. That is insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's the perfect definition of insanity, doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting different results. To borrow your analogy before, Elon Musk isn't just throwing away the apple, he's ripping up the entire orchard. This is what I think the British state needs to do. Foreign aid should really just be called, hey, here's some money, please don't do something, or please do what we ask you to do. It is professional bribery on the international scale. And it's all wrapped up in this kind of, isn't it all nice and all lovely? It's not. It's countries paying other countries to do things. And that's the reality of it. We talk about foreign aid in these kind of lovey-dovey terms, but it's a realpolitik kind of tool to get countries to either behave or either to do something that we want them to do. It's a very dirty business, the foreign aid game. And I think that I always would like to separate the difference between natural disaster relief and foreign aid. I think it's good that Britain can help at this time.
Yeah.
Sorry, in terms of this is like a hurricane or some kind
Yeah,
of
of course.
storm, so they train on the front line, great stuff. But why are we funding? I remember at one point we had I think there were the Latvian Spice Girls we were helping.
No. You got that wrong, Pete. It was the Ethiopian Spice Girls. We gave a lot of money to Ethiopia so they could discover their own Spice Girls. At one point, we were giving China a fair amount of money. Literally, this is not a joke, to teach some Chinese farmers how to grow rice, which seems to me like teaching people in the Sahara Desert how to deal with sand.
It's the perfect analogy of Westminster and public spending. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. At some point, it becomes real money, I suppose. But
it's I always say, why do we do this? And it certainly annoys the British public. Hang on, we're all struggling, and you're giving money away. You could maybe spend, I don't know, $1.5 billion of that money that you're giving it to foreign countries on, I don't know, winter fuel allowance for pensioners, that sort of thing. But we're always told, are we not, that, you see, it's about international diplomacy. It's about encouraging trade. Well, that's not the spirit of what foreign aid is supposed to be, is it? I knew this. He's frozen, hasn't he? He has frozen. I thought that. So I'm looking at a picture of Pete Barnes here. He's and I thought, hang on, he's frozen. So it's our version of that hit movie Frozen tonight. That's two people in a row. But you get the point. I mean, Pete was making a good point. Why do we do this? Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Why this year are we given £26.6 billion to foreign countries when we're borrowing money to a dangerous extent? Our national debt is bigger than ever before. We are borrowing what some economists think are suicidal amounts of money, suicidal levels of money. Now, I can understand borrowing money to keep the wheel in motion, to keep the nation ticking over. If you're that desperate, you have to borrow money to pay for things. But why are we borrowing money to give it straight to foreign countries? 0344 499 1000. When we come back, we'll have some of your messages, and I'll talk to some of you on the phone, and we'll try to make sure that none of you freeze. So stick around.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This.
Welcome back. By the way, Pete Barnes, you know, so I don't know if you guys, if you're watching it at home, you can probably see the same, but I get this sort of image of who it is I'm talking to on Zoom or FaceTime. And you always get, you always know things are, they suddenly go, and then they, you know, they're just stuck. And then you know the line has gone down. But just had a message from Pete Barnes explaining why his line went down. His laptop died. He'll be back on Friday. In person, it's probably for the best, really, don't you think? Good to talk to Pete Barnes, though. Let me know what you think about foreign aid. It's a basket case. It's out of control. Don't you wish that we had an Elon Musk and a Donald Trump to drive a freight through it to stop us virtue signaling and giving away all of that money? They're giving away, like, kind of, what is it, 26 billion? This will be really bad maths, but, you know, what is that? It's about sort of 10 times more. Maybe more, probably 15 times more than the budget for the winter fuel allowance, which I do believe is only about £1.5 million. So 1.5 million for the winter fuel budget allowance, 26.6 billion we're giving away to foreign countries this year. What about us? I mean, how about a government that cares about us? 03444991000. Well, listen, let's take a call now, and I'll read some of your messages that you've been kind enough to send in just a little while. First, let's talk to Mark in Stoke-on-Trent. Hi, Mark.
Hi, mate. How are you?
I'm very, very well. What would you like to say?
All I'm going to say, my phone won't die for what I've
Good. It'll make a change tonight. That'll make a change. Yeah, go on. What would you want to talk about, Starmer?
Starmer, I've worked all my life damned hard for 40 years. And he's nothing but a liar and manipulating. He's trying to rule everybody's lives. The old people, he doesn't care about the old people. The people who've been worked and paid all their money in for years and years, and he's tossing them aside, and he's letting all these young immigrants come in. And do you know why he's doing it? He's doing it because he wants to stay in power and treat people how he wants to be treated. And he isn't treating me like that.
Yeah, you're right.
And he can send me to prison after this. I don't care, because I'll go in a cell with Tommy Robson, who shouldn't be in prison. And Elon Musk and Donald Trump be brilliant.
Absolutely. Don't you wish you had them running this country?
Donald Trump, I don't know the gentleman, but I take my hat off to him. If I was in charge of this country, the first thing I would do, I would empty all these hotels. That's where the money's going. They'd be sent back.
And then what would you do with the migrants, with the asylum seekers?
All of them, send them back. And all these Asian people in this country years ago back in
There's about 100,000 of them.
I don't care how many there is. They go back to the countries where they come from. It's their country.
There's about 100,000 asylum seekers. That would take you about, like, 10 years or something to get rid of them all.
No, it wouldn't. How many planes have we got?
Yeah, honestly, Mark, it's a little bit... it's not that easy. We have drowned ourselves in this, and it's too late to just cure it with the stroke of a pen. It just is.
Well, the first thing I would do is the asylum seekers who are coming in now, who've been in here, say, 2 years, I would get rid of all them first, and then I would descale them after that. The ones what are not working and having the money...
Well, none of them, they're not allowed to work. You know that, don't you?
Sorry?
They're not working. They're not allowed to work.
Well, what about...
You know that, don't you?
What about the English people who don't go to work?
Well, that's a different issue. But you're talking about the migrants or the asylum seekers that work. Okay, none of them work.
None of them work?
Well, because they're not allowed to by law.
By law? Well, send them back to their own country and see if they can work there. Because they shouldn't be coming in our country and having our job.
I tend to, I'm with you in principle. And I wish it was as easy as that, but we've made such a mess of this now, Mark, that it's too late with the stroke of a pen. All right, we're sending them all home. It'd be a nice idea, but it ain't going to happen. We're stuck with this lot. And by the way, as you alluded to at the start of this conversation, we have a government that doesn't really want to get rid of them. We have a government that likes migrants, so it ain't ever going to happen. It's a bit of a problem. Mark, interesting call. Good call. Thank you very much. Call me again. Mark in Stoke-on-Trent, you know, I sort of agree with his sentiments, but it's not that easy, is it? You know, I don't want to be one of these Westminster types who go, the thing is, it's much more complex than you realise. Well, it is complex if you've got 100,000 people living in hotels, asylum seekers, as I said, not working. You can't, you know, you can't just say, right, let's send them all home. It's just not that easy. You feel it is, but it isn't. It isn't. We've made our bed, and now we've got to lie on it, and it is a mess. We'll take more of your calls, and I'll read some of your messages after these messages. Stay tuned.
And there's a sense that they kind of don't care about what the public thinks. There's a sense that they don't really give a monkeys because, you know, they know best. You know, they trot out this old thing that, you know, we're not the Tories, you know, they're evil, nasty, horrible people. We're the good guys. You know, everything we do is whiter than white. Everything we do is justifiable because we occupy the moral high ground. And the public is sick to death of it. That's why Keir Starmer is one of the most unpopular prime ministers in the history of Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Got some messages. This one's from Dorothy. She said, do you know the amount of money Labour have at this point in their governance given away to foreign countries? All I would like to know is why. Well, as I said, Dorothy, thanks for your kind words, by the way. Dorothy loves my show. Good. Glad. all I know, Dorothy, is we always give away about £15 billion a year, despite whatever state the economy is in, and we know the state our economy is in right now. This country is teetering on the financial edge, borrowing more money than ever before. The national debt, massive, massive, trillions. And we're giving money away. So this year, £15 billion general foreign aid budget, plus £11.6 billion special giveaways to foreign developing countries for green projects. So this year, £26.6 billion. Could pay for a lot of winter fuel allowances, couldn't it? Sort the waspy tax problem out, wouldn't it? It would help the farmers, wouldn't it? All of these crises that the Labour government has plunged itself into due to alleged financial hardship, financial shortages. They're just billions of pounds are being given away. To say it doesn't add up is the overstatement of the century. Let's now play a couple of voice notes and then we'll go to the phones. First up is Anna on Islamophobia.
Evening, Kev. Just 6% of the British population is Muslim. Every time you persecute a white Christian citizen of this country, you crank up the hatred towards the Islamic people. You're not helping them by guarding them and allowing them to behave like idiots in public and stamping upon white Christian Britain. You're putting a bullseye on their back because there's a lot more of us than there are of them. I wonder if the powers that be have bothered to think that far ahead.
It's an interesting WhatsApp from Anna there. Yeah, I do think the Labour government's policies on Islamophobia and all that are divisive. You know, we don't need a definition of Islamophobia. You know, we never needed one in the first place. You certainly don't need a new one. It is to identify something that doesn't really exist. If there's a real racism problem in this country, it's anti-Semitism. That is where the crisis is right now. I don't see Labour doing much about that. No council on anti-Semitism. Why would that be, do you think? Not enough votes in it for them. Only 300,000 Jewish people live in this country. That's what that is all about. Here's another WhatsApp from Susan on Keir Starmer.
This is Keir Starmer, aka Mr. Boring as Anything. Just to tell you, my public, I hate you lot, especially you English lot, and I love immigrants. And also, you far righters, I hate you more than the far lefters. Over and out.
That's Susan there. I suspect that's not her real voice. That's her Keir Starmer impression, fixing the foundations. Those voice coach lessons, get your bloody money back. Honestly, what a waste. As I say, he sounds like a kind of parochial priest, a sanctimonious parochial priest who came fifth in the Kenneth Williams sound-alike competition. No full marks for his voice at all. Right, let's go to the phones. Let's talk to John in West Lothian. Hello, John.
Good evening, Kevin. Just like to talk about this ridiculous foreign aid budget.
Yeah.
For years, we've been absolutely ripped off, and government after government has continued to send money to India, Pakistan, China, who are also in the nuclear business, who are also sending rockets to the moon.
Yeah, they've got their own space programs, and we're giving them money to develop their skills at growing rice or whatever. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, they can't look after their own people, but we're doing all the things for them. And the other I object to is money going to countries who have civil wars. They create the problem, and yet we have got to pay for them. It is absolutely ludicrous when we've got people in this country that are so desperate and need help, real help, the NHS. And I'm not talking about bureaucracy in the NHS, I'm talking about real doctors and nurses.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, when people like you and I, John, say, hang on a second, you know, why are we doing this? Why are we borrowing money to give it away to foreign countries? As I say, this year looks like £26.6 billion will be wafting its way out of this country to various developing countries to do God knows what. And you say, well, why are we doing this? And then you people in the Westminster Westminster game was, oh, well, you don't understand, you see. What this is really about is greasing the wheels of trade. It is it's diplomacy. It's keeping on the right side of China. It's keeping on the right side of India so we can do good trade with them. Well, is that the spirit of foreign aid? I thought it was to help underprivileged people, to help the poverty-stricken, to help those who need help around the world. But no, it's to aid trade. So another reason not to spend it.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. And, you know, it's an ego trip for politicians. And the other thing which you mentioned is about this money that we're given for environmental projects in developing countries. Now, we, as a major developing country, only contribute about 1% of pollution. So what are we doing? What are we doing it for? It's just trying to get kudos for politicians who haven't got a bloody clue about what the money should be spent on, because it's not their money, it's our money.
Absolutely right. And you know, while we allow maniacs like Crazy Ed Miliband to go around signalling their virtue, oh, look at us, look what we're doing. We're doing so much for the environment. As you say, John, it's quite right. We don't make any difference at all because we produce less than 1% of the world's pollution, less than 1% of carbon emissions. So therefore, nothing we can do will make any difference. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to look it up because I found it yesterday. The amount of coal-fueled power stations that China has got is phenomenal. It's about 2,300. Here we are. I've got it here. So China has 2,363 coal plants and is building 1,171 more. So totally it has 3,534 coal-fueled power stations, and that is churning out 28% of the world's pollution, and they're not doing a damn thing. It is insanity, John. Very good call. Thank you for calling. Call me again, John, in West Lothian there. Well, it's that time. It's that time to talk to Tarquin in London. Hi, Tark.
And here we have Kevin O'Sullivan, the greatest radio presenter ever to...
It's the only reason I get you on to say this.
With his dulcet tones and his common sense, makes Mike Graham look like Adolf Hitler.
I don't even know what to make of that. I'm not going there. But Angela Rayner, Islamophobia. You want to talk about that?
I just caught a tail end of what you were saying there, Kevin. I think what we're seeing here is Angela Rayner et al., including the Meister Ramoniac Dominic Grieve, trying to continue the greasing of their palms. We need a department of GE2, globalist exploitation. That's what we need in Britain. So what we're seeing is the Muslim vote is we all know it's the last bastion of Labour. They have an existential threat. Without the Muslim vote, they care not a jot for the Muslims. They only care about the voting base of those Muslim people, Kevin. As we all know this. It's so nauseatingly crass and pathetic. And it's headed up by the most intelligent woman that they've got in the party, Angela Rayner.
Yes, indeed. And of course, yeah, you know, she represents Ashton-under-Lyne. That's her constituency, a very heavy Muslim community there, very prominent, and she needs the Muslim vote. So it's not surprising that she's spearheading this Islamophobia business. And we don't need a new definition. We never needed a definition in the first place. As I say, if we have a racism problem, a prominent racism problem right now, it's anti-Semitism. I don't see the Labour Party doing a whole lot about that. No. Do you?
No, not at all. You're absolutely right, as usual, Kevin. And it's so blatantly obvious. That was with that video of her with about 100 Muslim gentlemen, as you pointed out earlier on in the programme. It showed, didn't it, that she's about as supportive of women's rights as, I don't know, Charles Manson or something. Yeah, she didn't give a crap. It's all about her. It's so self-orientated. It's just vomit-making.
Well, she is a microcosm of the Labour Party's Islam macrocosm, if you see what I mean, that she is trying to do on a local basis what Labour is trying to do on a national basis, and that is shore up the Muslim vote, because if they lose the Muslim vote, they lose all their seats. She loses her seat, they lose their majority. And by the way, you mentioned about council tax. She's about to impose rises of up to 10% around the country, so that might be what people are really concerned about. Listen, Tarquin, always good to talk with.
Thank you.
Call me again very soon. Tarquin in London. Let's go to Debbie in Essex, who's angry about council tax. Well, Debbie, I've just revealed that Angela Rayner has just signed off on council tax rises all over the country of 10%. And we now just found out today that councils around the country have spent £141 million on PlayStations, yoga lessons, Tai Chi sessions, and God knows what for illegal migrants. So that's why you're going to be paying more council tax. How do you feel about that?
If it's Debbie you're talking of, and it is actually me on the station.
I'm talking to you,
I am... Well, I didn't get a call back, that's why.
No, you're on the show now, Debbie.
Okay, well, I am completely cheesed off with all this.
Yeah.
It's almost like where I live, all these people that are coming out and they're getting on the boats and they're coming in, and I absolutely cannot believe the amount of money that has been spent on them since 2022.
Well, over the last year, Debbie,
mind blowing.
You saw that story that we've broken today here on Talk. It's a Telegraph story, to be fair. Freedom of Information requests have revealed that over the last year, councils all over the country have spent £141 million on things like PlayStations, yoga lessons, driving lessons, mobile phones, you name it. Freebies, luxury free goods for our migrant friends. I mean,
it is literally one of the most despicable things I've heard in such a long time.
That's a good point.
It is
well
beyond
put.
Awful.
Yeah.
Literally beyond awful. But I was only phoning about my council tax because where I live,
you're in Essex, right? Yeah.
I'm in Essex. I live in a very, very small cottage, got a small amount of land with chickens and bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
My council tax here is in Band G.
Right.
So I pay about £3,800 a month.
Blimey. That's a lot of money.
The people at the end of my road, which are about 200 yards away from me, and there's maybe 6 houses, are in Band D. I get no lighting, no recycling. My dustbin, in all fairness, does come once a month. But I live on a private bridleway. But it's a bridleway that's also public.
Unbelievable.
And in all the 5 years I've lived here, not one single person from the council or anywhere has come to sort out and maintain this bridleway.
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all, but I think the scandal here is where local councils are spending their money. They are spending zillions on making illegal migrants feel very much at home, basically giving them a load of gifts. That's why you're not getting much attention, because your council, no doubt, is busy lavishing all its funds on the migrant community. Debbie, sympathy to you, and thank you for calling. Please call me again, but I've got to move on. Debbie in Essex there. Let's go back to the voice notes now. Got 3 more. Here's Steve on Starmer.
These bloody governments, right? Imagine being so bad at being a government that you've got to import unvetted voters. They could be anyone. They could be terrorists, predators, murderers, anyone. And then they have to bribe them with free stuff instead of just trying to just like make your own people happy. I'm sick to death of a lot of them. Get me out of here.
Yeah, I think it sums up what people... We've just had enough, haven't we? We've had enough of these useless politicians. And they're apparent, you know, Mike Graham made this point this morning, very good point too. He said, never mind about Islamophobia. Let's have a look at our government, our cabinet, Keir Starmer and the gang. Do they suffer from Anglophobia? They don't like us. They don't like us. They're trying to, it seems to me, they're trying to dilute our culture, to wreck our culture by this mass invasion of millions of migrants. It's just ridiculous. Let's go back to the WhatsApp voice notes, and this is Claire on asylum benefits.
I, as a Merseyside resident, should say that I am appalled at Anfield Football Club, who are giving them trips to visit the club. Why not take children who are represented by the Make-A-Wish Foundation? With terminally ill children in our country, I'm so angry that our own worthy causes are being spat at and turned away.
Claire there, I think, summing up the fury of a lot of people there. Good point, well made, Claire. And finally, on the WhatsApp voice note front, it is Jim on the Nottingham killer, Valdo Calicone.
Hi, Kevin. I cannot believe what I'm just watching and listening to, the fact that they're withholding this evidence. I cannot believe it. Please tell me that even though they're not releasing it as they should to the families who are going to spend the rest of their lives dealing with this horror, that if they're not going to get this information, at least the authorities are going to get it and they're going to act on it. Please tell me that.
Well, I can't really help you there, Jim, because they're going to keep it to themselves. 200-page report that will not be published, will not be released to the public, and more to the point, will not be released to the grieving families. And that seems to me to be all wrong, very, very wrong. The privacy of the patient, Valdo Calicone, prioritised over the rights of those poor families. Come on, this is just insane. 03444991000. Let's go back to the phones. I'm not sure if this is the same Claire, but if it is, good. Claire in the Wirral. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Kevin.
It is you, isn't it? It is you. Well, I'm glad you're on. That's fine. It's cool. I thought it might be, and I'm glad, because you made a very good point on the voice notes there. And I mean, yeah, Liverpool Football Club, free tours, but you know, £141 million over the last year by various councils around the country has been given to migrants. They're like presents. They're like luxury gifts. Oh, look, here's a PlayStation. Why don't you play with it? Oh, look, have some free yoga lessons. Oh, here's a free mobile phone. Oh, you want a SIM card? Yes, of course. We're just giving them luxury items. 141 million quid. I mean, why are we paying for migrants' driving lessons? Any idea, Claire?
I don't know, but I mean, there's so many worthy causes. I mean, there are people in poverty in this country. And, you know, to give, I mean, they at one point, we were talking about them being asylum seekers, but I wouldn't give them that privilege because they're not.
I think they're criminals. I think they're criminals.
They are. And, you know, I mean, it makes my blood boil, Kevin, but at the same time, I find it so upsetting. I remember before the election, I phoned up Talk, and there was a Labour advisor, you know, on the panel there. Yeah. And I was talking, and I did predict, and I said, you know what? I said, if Labour get in, I said, I'll give them a month, and there'll be civil unrest. Yeah. And the
you weren't wrong. You weren't wrong.
And the ex-Labour advisor, he put his head in his hands and he was just shaking his head as if, I can't believe this woman. But I was
yeah, because no doubt, you know, him being from the left, you're a racist, you're Islamophobic or something like that. I mean, that's what they do. It's what Keir Starmer does. As soon as somebody doesn't agree with him, he just says, oh, you're a far-right extremist. Let me ask you this, Claire, just before you go. You remember 2020 when we were in the height of the COVID restrictions, the lockdowns. Yeah. What is your take, or what are your thoughts on the fact that Christmas Eve 2020, a woman called Leonie Mellinger got on a train in Brighton, first class, up to London, went through several tiers. You remember the tier system? Came to London, which was in strict lockdown. Those of us who live in this great city were not allowed to see our loved ones, not allowed to go next door, not allowed to leave our homes. But Keir Starmer had this voice coach visit him at Labour headquarters to teach him how to speak. Didn't go very well, quite clearly. And and he stands accused of breaking the lockdown rules there. I don't know what you were going through then, but most of us were suffering pretty bad restrictions on our entire lives. Here's this guy inviting a voice coach to come and teach him how to speak. What do you make of that?
Well, he was pretty outraged with Boris, wasn't he, over his cake? I mean, it was a surprise party, apparently, and his champagne or whatever he had. I mean, I just think that he's just a hypocrite.
Yes, he is. He's a hypocrite.
He's a hypocrite and he's a troublemaker.
Yeah, he's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite and he's a liar, and I don't say that lightly. He's the Prime Minister, and we accuse him here and now of being a liar. Claire, very good voice note message, and really good to talk to you in person. You call me any old time. Got to go now because the show is ending, but good to talk. Claire in the Wirral there, and in the studio is Petri Hoskin. Hello.
I'm enjoying your braces. Yeah.
There you go.
Very.
Come on, everybody. Come on. You're supposed to put me on screen. I'm showing the braces.
They're wonderful.
There you go. There you go. Orange.
Yeah.
Orange.
You're Justin Urquhart Stewart.
Yeah. Why are you wearing orange braces, Kev? Keep my trousers up. Right. Come on, next.
Right. I'm going to be talking about the number of very rich men, billionaires, surrounding Donald Trump. And should we see that as something to be worried about when you see Musk making statements? Musk puts employees at USAID on leave. So it's Musk doing it. He's not been voted. He's going to the president and saying, "Is this okay?" And the president is saying yes. Is that something we should fear? I'm talking to a brilliant guy called Seamus Bruner, who wrote a book called Oligarchs, which is Control.
What do you think?
I think it's deeply disturbing.
I mean, you know, the thing about all these billionaires, Donald Trump has surrounded himself with these mega rich people. Most of his cabinet, if you like, are billionaires
or heritage.
But they're successful, you know. So they're good at stuff. So maybe it's not a bad idea.